I am Ira Horwitz. I'm the founder of Corner Shop Creative. For those who are unfamiliar with us, we are a digital marketing agency. We support nonprofits in a variety of digital needs, primarily designing and building websites for nonprofits. We also do a lot of hosting, maintenance, and support that many of you, I look at the names, are taking advantage of currently. As well as a lot of digital strategy work to make sure that people go to your website through various tactics like SEO management, Google Ads management, and email marketing. So if you're interested in any of those services, feel free to reach out to us. You can contact us at hello@cornershopcreative.com, or you can just check out our website at cornershopcreative.com. We're going to jump right in. I'm really excited for this panel today. We've got some of my amazing colleagues here who have been doing a lot of great work with AI and are very familiar with a lot of the tools and tactics that are out there and how we're going to be able to use them going forward with a lot of you as clients or with nonprofits in general. So we've got some questions that we're going to be going around and asking. But first, I'd love to just do some quick introductions if we go around our panel here, and if you just want to say who you are, where you're calling in from, and your role at Corner Shop would be great. So Seyong, you're top on my screen. Do you want to start us off?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Seyong. I've been at Corner Shop for almost 5 years now, and I'm calling in from Valencia, Spain. And I am currently working on the site builds team where we build websites from scratch. I will go ahead and hand it over to Mabel.
Hey everyone, I'm Mabel. I am new to the Corner Shop team. I've been here about 8 months. I'm a content strategist here, and I primarily work on the digital strategy team, but I also do a lot of work on site build and content work there. I'm going to Ben now.
Hi, I'm Ben Eisenberg. I've been with Corner Shop for about almost 3 years now. I'm a developer on the support team, and I'm also in Valencia, Spain. And I'll hand it off to Max.
Hi everybody, I'm Max Zimmer. I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon. I'm a senior developer on the digital strategy team, and yeah, excited to be talking about AI today.
Great. And I didn't mention, but I'm just outside Washington, D.C. I'm not in Spain, unfortunately, and it's the first sunny day we've had here in like what feels like a week. So I apologize, I'm distracted by the sun. But I'm excited to get started on this, and I'd like to just kick things off with just hearing generically from all of you about what excites you the most about the potential of AI in the nonprofit space. And we'll go in that same order. So Seyong, if you want to start us off.
Yes, so what excites me the most, I, as a project manager, interface directly a lot of the time with our nonprofit clients, and I get a direct insight into how our clients wear multiple hats, they face time, budget, and resource constraints. And AI used to be this overwhelming, unexplored territory, but recently there's been a ton of focus on it. It's evolving very quickly, especially in the past year, and there are now new tons of options for nonprofits to choose from. And it's even becoming the norm in the tools that we are familiar with for years, such as it being integrated on Microsoft Suite. I believe it's Copilot, and Google Suite with Gemini being pushed. And so now it's even easier and more accessible to integrate with AI. So I'm looking forward with these tools becoming easier to use and more user-friendly to see how it's going to make my nonprofit clients who are often stressed or overwhelmed for them to implement these, become comfortable with it, and to see the creative ways that they begin implementing it for efficiency.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Seyong said. On a more kind of specific level with the content world, seeing those nonprofit clients who are so overwhelmed with constantly having to come up with different forms of content can be really overwhelming and time consuming. And having worked in nonprofit communications, I get that sometimes one channel feels a lot more comfortable for content creation than others. And so I'm really excited about how AI tools can help us iterate on that content and create content for different channels to expand how you are meeting your audience and continuing to grow that new user acquisition through maybe modes that you weren't previously investigating or weren't comfortable with before.
Well, I guess one of the things that excites me most about AI, besides kind of the overall ability for tooling to just automate things and make things easier, is it really helps in development to not break the flow. So when you're working on something new, sometimes you would run into a place, or maybe you're doing calculus homework, it could be anything. You'll run into an issue and you don't have an expert available to answer that question for you, and it can be helpful. While it can still be wrong, it's usually correct, and it's more correct than maybe your neighbor or your friend. I'll hand it off to Max.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting in the developer space. As someone on the digital strategy team, I do a lot of stuff with analytics, and so I'm pretty excited about predictive analytics and how that can be used to influence campaigns. Specifically, like using historical data. These are things like giving frequency, event attendance, channel preferences, and then driving a specialized focus for appeals to like at-risk donors or high donors or even prospects. That also gets into some forms of information delivery and how like chatbots can also be used to help with that predictive analytics and personalization.
Great. So this next one, I want to go specifically to Mabel, but obviously if others want to chime in, go for it. So obviously right now there's a lot of hype going on. There's, I feel like everything we're talking about, we're getting emails from every platform and provider that we work with about AI. So what would you say right now, though, is the biggest misconception that nonprofits might have about using AI in their work?
Yeah, for sure. This is from my perspective as a content strategist. So if others want to jump in, please do. But one of the biggest things that I see, especially when communicating with clients about using AI, is that they're concerned that the human-centered ethos of their mission is going to disappear if they start using AI tools. And of course, as nonprofits, we're really driven by connecting to folks and using real language, focusing on emotions and the power that those emotions invoke for giving. And so one way that I'm trying to help clients understand that this doesn't have to be a concern is understanding that especially generative tools or any sort of chatbots can be used as a tool, and that's it. And so really leaning on having brand guides and a strong understanding of what your mission is and how you want to communicate it, and then use that in coordination with the tool really helps make sure that what I hear clients say is they're concerned of like robot talk on their site, or like really crunchy, like just sounding bad language that maybe is more efficient to just pop it onto their site, but is really lacking how they want to talk to their constituents.
Yeah, I often hear that concern as well, so that's very common. Anybody else have any thoughts on that, or other ideas of how to avoid that problem when you? Yeah. Oh, you might be muted there, Ben.
Yeah, so as far as avoiding some of this, my first piece of advice is to use it as an editor. Don't use it to write your content, use it to edit your content. Because again, you've got a great editor that can research the topic decently, that you can access at any time of day. So if you're working at this at an odd hour, you can't bump a coworker to look at something, you can use this. But then you're still keeping it in your voice. The other thing you can do is, if you have several examples of content in the way that you've written them yourself that you would like it to generate, it's very helpful to have those available examples, 2 or 3, maybe 4. It doesn't, more doesn't hurt to a point to generate that content, so that you can generate it still following your overall voice. And then my final thing is review everything before posting it, and make sure you don't post something like the prompt. If anyone saw the article in the New York Times where a professor was, obviously using ChatGPT when reviewing students' papers because they pasted that in the, the notes on the students' paper. So you want to avoid that. But those would be my suggestions on that.
I'll say from an operations standpoint, we've reviewed resumes and things like that, and we've definitely gotten some in that it's clear people made the same mistake. They included that prompt, or we get the same exact message from everyone. Those are the ones that get ignored. But the ones who clearly did use AI, but still then personalized it, and we may not have even known, those are the ones that stood out the most because they were concise, they were professional, they were well written, but they were also in the person's voice. And so, yeah, those are some great points and great advice. Any other comments on this before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I have one comment, and since I'm a project manager, I'll focus on the operations or workflow perspective. But one common misconception is we'll just buckle down and sit down. We're going to find the right tool, and it's going to make all of our operations easier. But one thing that I found is that it takes a lot of time, especially when it comes to the bigger workflows, instead of just editing a small piece of content. When it comes to the bigger picture, it takes a lot of time and dedication, and also an organization that values and carves out time to develop these AI processes to make sure everyone is trained effectively, and that we as a team are able to observe our own roles within positions within the organization to see how AI would fit into our organization. So that's something I appreciate about Corner Shop, is that the organization gives us a thumbs up to be curious and to bring our learnings back. And so it's very important for an organization to kind of adapt a mindset of constantly learning and being curious, instead of, a quick plug and play tool is going to exist out there that we need to identify.
That's great. Thanks. So moving on to the next one, I'd like to start with you, Max. I'd love to hear what you think are some easy wins that you've seen nonprofits achieve by starting to use AI, especially for content creation, but really for any purpose.
Yeah, something that's come up a lot recently is identifying gaps in content, like existing content on their websites. So this content gap filling is really great for informing new content opportunities, which can lead to that improved freshness and authority, which are things that AI really looks for when you're doing AI search. And that kind of builds into benefits for both SEO and AEO, which is that new kind of answer engine optimization that you might have heard about. I also think that there's a lot of shortcuts that it provides. So things like, I think it's called Storylab, can be used to spin up dozens of little social media captions for posts that you might have, which could take a few hours manually, but it comes complete with hashtags already and calls to actions and stuff like that. So I think these are the types of shortcuts that we're looking for with AI. And I'm just going to touch quickly on what they already said, which is that AI is used for augmenting your work, not as a human replacement. You still need the human in the loop. And so by adjusting that workflow to include this, then that is your easy win.
Great. Yeah, Mabel, as our resident content writer, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think Max is absolutely correct. And if you're feeling more hesitant about using AI for pure content generation, or you're wanting to take a little bit of a step back and just use it more as that editor that Ben was talking about, one of the really easy wins that I see clients use is uploading something they have written and then asking for it to structure it using heading tags or to populate the metadata. So you can just plug that right into Yoast, and it's already built on what you personally have created, but it's structuring it in a way that maybe is not as comfortable to you, or you don't know as much about metadata or how you want to use heading tags. And I think that can really help keep your voice and also expedite making sure that your site is really optimized for SEO.
Great. All right. Great feedback. So Se-Young, I'd love to I know you've done a lot of research and work on this, but what tools or prompts have you seen so far that you think work best for nonprofits who are just getting started with AI generating?
Yeah, I don't have a specific prompt, but I did recently attend the NTC conference, and I attended a prompt writing workshop. And while I was there, they went over 4 ingredients of prompt writing, which was very helpful for me to keep in mind. These don't have to be in any particular order. But the first one is goal. So making sure that you relate to the AI generator. What is the response you want, and what is the format that it should be provided in? The next thing is to provide context. Why do you need it, and who is involved? And generally, I have 2 audiences. I always describe who this material is going to be for, but also who I am. So I always generally start off with, I am a project manager at a web agency. And that's enough context for the generator to figure out to pull in website lingo because I'm a project manager at a web agency. Next, we want to define expectations, and this could look in different ways. So this could be the length that you expect the response to be, or the specific keywords that you're looking for, or the tone, or the subject matter that you're really wanting to focus on. So making sure that there are clear expectations outlined. And the last ingredient of this prompt salad is something that surprised me, because I did not include this in the past, but it is source. So what sources should the AI tool be pulling from? And because AI pulls from an open body of knowledge and references, the speaker at the conference let us know that telling AI to draw from specific sources ensures that it's going to stay relevant, credible, and be appropriate information. So some examples can be, please only draw from news outlets, or please only draw from other social media posts, or even specific academic journals is an example that I saw of, I really like what's being posted on so-and-so journal. Please make sure to focus on that when generating the response. So making sure to kind of follow and have these as a basis is a good kind of format to follow when using an AI-generated writing.
Anyone else have any other thoughts? Or
Yeah, I guess additionally, I would say make sure to check out each of the major tools. I guess sort of like they're called large language models, but the main ones you'll see are from ChatGPT or OpenAI. They have several. There's several versions of Gemini from Google, and there's also several versions of Claude from Anthropic. So a lot of people say that Claude is the best for creative writing. Again, these things are also hard to quantify. They're trying to come up with ways to quantify that. So you may try a few of them and see what fits. There's a company in Europe called Mistral, and they have their own, and they train it heavily on European languages, I guess from the EU. So maybe if you need to write content in another language, that might be in like Spanish or Italian, that might be worth pursuing. So definitely try out different ones. You can use the same prompt. The same prompt won't work the same way for different LLMs too, so that's important to keep in mind. But try them out and see which one fits you best.
great. Yeah, we're seeing that, and what we're seeing a lot of too is a lot of these tools are integrating with the products you might already have. So if you have Google Workspace, chances are Gemini is already built into that, and so using it kind of creates an easier, fewer barriers for entry when it's already integrated in some of the tools and processes you're using. Microsoft's Copilot is also integrated with Outlook and all the tools that use there. So it's always great to take advantage of those tools that are just kind of right in front of you and right there. Cool. So I'd love to see, Mabel, maybe you start this off, and Max, I'm sure you have opinions, but kind of thinking of the negatives, and we hear this a lot. Have you seen any examples where AI maybe negatively impacts or hurts a nonprofit's messaging or even credibility? And what can we do to avoid this?
It's a great question. And I think that it's often overlooked because folks are really excited to have something that's going to help them just get a lot more content out there, which I feel like is a strong message for SEO, like constantly refresh your content. I have seen it negatively impact a site's credibility, which is unfortunate, but also a good learning tool. The example that I will share is that when folks are asking a chatbot to generate any sort of content, a common use of language is saying, create an outline for a blog post for blah, blah, blah. And then that client is likely or excited to like get new content up, so they just put that exactly on, that copy and paste that we were talking about before. The issue with either outlines or even drafts of content when generated from a chatbot is that they're often very thin. And so Google and other search engines have this modeling that identifies and flags thin content. And SEO engines or SEO tools can identify when that thin content is prevalent on your site, and that will automatically start to chip away at your site's authority. So really making sure that you are using AI tools to create outlines, to create ideas, generating any sort of prompts, and then really building it out, including internal linking on your own site, external linking to other sites, really building it up and making it a piece of content that is going to be seen as valuable both to your audience and to search engines, is a way to really avoid being flagged for thin content or for any sort of like bot activity that might be associated with just like a page that has a few headings and like 2 paragraphs. That's like the majority of where I'm most concerned with clients starting to use AI for content generation and just putting it right onto their site.
Thanks. That makes sense. Max or anyone else have anything to add? Or
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of examples out there. I think it was the National Eating Disorders Association had an AI chatbot that provided harmful guidance, and it was not good. It had some pretty big fallout. There have been other nonprofits that have employed chatbots, and also, of course, for-profits that have misleading advice, or they misrepresent the facts for like processes or from their documentation even. I've seen that like AI generated donor letters that have fabrications, or in AI we call them hallucinations, and that just undermines trust when your donors like kind of look into it a little more. Yeah, you kind of have to remember that like a lot of these LLMs are trained on the internet, which is mostly sewage. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So while there are guardrails in place, it's always good to verify. For the particular strategies, I would say, first of all, establish some clear AI policies and guidelines for your organization. Use like an appropriate framework for you. You might even build your own little framework, but there are a lot of them out there that you can kind of start basing that on. And always mandate like human in the loop reviews of content, and if you're doing code, definitely, because you don't want to be like extracting PII accidentally. And then also always be transparent. If you're using AI, say that you're using AI. Like don't just like assume that, okay, we're going to make this into our voice and now everything's hunky-dory. If you used AI to create a realistic looking image that's like photorealism, you should disclose that it was AI generated and not real.
Great, thanks, Matt. Those are excellent points, and that kind of leads me into the next question that I was going to ask about, and this came up in the chat as well, that around kind of ethics and disclosure and transparency. And so these days, obviously, there's a lot of concerns about using AI over some of the ethical concerns around, is it learning off of copyrighted information? There's an environmental impact and things like that. And so what is your feeling on those impact, and what do you keep in mind regarding ethics, transparency, and so forth? And I'll open this up to everybody, so anybody can chime in here.
I kind of just talked about transparency. So, yeah, definitely being transparent is good, but also like being, like having ethics built into your policies is essential. But also, you can make those policies public on your website and say like, hey, if you're curious about our specific AI policies, here they are, and this is how we use them. These are the tools that we use, and that just helps to build trust.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll speak to the environmental impact concern. I'm going to be transparent and say I still haven't fully grappled with this. And it is something that I do think about pretty often, especially working with environmental nonprofits and organizations. And the way that I have felt comfortable, at least right now, as we are really starting to integrate AI more in Cornershop, and then also with the work we do with clients, and as clients integrate it into their own nonprofits, I'm thinking more about like, how can I use AI as a tool, and a tool in the way that I would use another tool to help me with my work, versus really using it for the sake of saving a few minutes or like getting the job done quicker. I think that it's really easy to type a question into ChatGPT and get a really quick answer. But I think Ben said this before, it's often not right. And so it's not often not right. It's sometimes not right. And so if I'm really going to need to be like investigating something or learning something new myself, I start with other sources, and I'm really like reading through documentation and taking the time to continue learning instead of taking a shortcut if in the long run I'm already going to need to take more time. So it's really just like an ebb and flow of how is this assisting me, and then also where can I pull back and continue doing the work in the way that I feel comfortable doing it.
Ben or Sam, anything to add?
I just
Yeah.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to add too, one of the kind of important things, just tagging on to what Mabel said about, do I really need to use AI for this, and what will it achieve? Because oftentimes you see this kind of case of somebody, I'm going to write something and then I'm going to put it in AI, and then AI will make it flowery and big, and then somebody else is going to take that and put it in back in this AI and say, what does this mean? Make it concise and give me bullet points. So we want to avoid things like that. Also, just this from the more development side or math side, you don't want it doing math at this point in time. At least with LLMs, they shouldn't be doing math. You can maybe use it to write some code to do some calculations, but it's not good for calculations, and you shouldn't trust that. And I'll hand it to Seyoung.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Max said about that transparency and putting a disclaimer on your website. I recently came across a client who actually hired us with Ben for some AI work, and they brought it to a stop because they thought it was very important as an organization to clarify their values and their stance on using AI, and wanted to have that policy and language. So that's something that I fully respected and think it's important, especially now that AI is becoming more prominent in our workflows.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, this is definitely something we're very mindful of we certainly want to be respectful and make sure that it's not going after it. But I think it's just setting the right policies in your organization is always the right place to start. Of how do you use IA? Make sure you're not using it excessively, as Mabel and Max said. And just making sure that you're using it in the most effective ways for you. already module, LLMs that have already kind of learned and been trained. Those are the ones that environmental impact has already kind of happened and it's already there. And so that's, I think, where a lot of that large scale water use and environmental impact can come in, is training those large models into everything that you do. And so most of what we're talking about here is going to be working within the already learned applications, and therefore won't have as big of an environmental impact, and in many cases could even save time and save efforts of, if you're spending 5 hours Googling something or creating it, as opposed to ChatGPT doing it in a few minutes, it could actually save some of that cost and time, or think of travel expenses and things like that that may not be necessary anymore due to some of the tools. So those are things that I like thinking about with AI. So I know we still happy to answer any other questions. It seems like some others are coming in, and we'll get to those in a minute. But a few others that we had here. So the one that I like to ask, and Mabel, it'd be great if you can start us off here, but search engines, we've kind of mentioned this already, but search engines are rapidly changing the way that they're doing things. And now you do get that AI overview at the top of your search results on Google and many other platforms. So how is this impacting how nonprofit websites are ranked, and what should organizations be doing to adapt to this?
Yeah, absolutely. On a super large scale, I think this is something that should always be at the core of when you're creating content for your website. You want real people to be able to read it. And I say real people because the AI overview is starting to work to populate an answer that will sound like a person is answering it to you. When you Google a question, you're going to see something that answers it like you just asked someone a question. And they're getting that information by scanning websites and reading websites and populating information. And so keeping your content readable, organized, consistently, really clear in how it's structured, using heading tags, making sure your metadata is all updated, is going to make it easier for search engines to scan your pages and then populate your answers so that you're actually showing up in the AI overview. Something that is really interesting that's just starting to come to light is that regardless of where you rank for a keyword, say you have a #1 spot for a keyword, if another website has a better flushed out answer that sounds more like a person answering the question, they're going to secure that AI overview spot. And so we're really seeing search engines move away from centering that #1 keyword place in search results and really leaning on the content as the key figure of like, how easily is this going to answer the question that a searcher is looking for? And then alongside that, with SEO tools, we're seeing now ways to really track SERP features. SERP stands for Search Engine Results Page features. So we're looking at how often are your pages included in the hyperlinks on the side of AI overviews, or how often are they included in the hyperlinks of the actual overview. And so just making sure that your content is not so disorganized that it can't be read, or like stuffed with technical language, is really going to aid you. And even outside of AI and AI overviews, I would recommend that anyways. So if you're keeping that in mind, you should more or less be able to continue your visibility and make sure that folks are still able to find you.
Any other comments there? That's great.
Yeah. So there's a lot involved in this. Like SEO isn't going away. But now there's AEO, which kind of adds another layer to it. And this is answer engine optimization. You really kind of have to embrace it because it's here. And so this really gets into, like, we have the traditional link-centric ranking, which is really SEO. And then there's the AI answer delivery system that these chatbots are now capable of. And as Mabel already said, like, if you have content that is written more like a human and answers in a, I guess, a more predictable way, then it will be ranked higher in the answer engine. There's the old like EEAT thing for experience. I'm going to try to remember this: experience, expertise, authority, and trust, I think. And so like if you focus on those four concepts, it's kind of the same thing as it's been around for a while, but it's playing even a bigger role with the AI chats and lookups. Since I'm a developer, I'm going to come at this from also the development standpoint, which is structured data is very important for AI. So while it is reading these the content on your page and making sure that that's like sounding human, structured data is also important. So if you have like proper heading hierarchies, that's a good start. This is like basic accessibility stuff. But if you include things like a FAQ at the bottom of your of a post, if you include schema within your markup, then that's going to be really key too. If you're like shoving keywords into your content, it's going to pick up on that a lot quicker. And then I think one of the last things I'll say about this is that there was a statistic that I read recently that something like 40% of searches are now resolved through AI. So this is a pretty big deal. And metrics are definitely shifting. So like if you have something like Google Analytics set up, then you might start seeing ChatGPT query parameter. I think it's the UTM something. UTM source, I think, is, and it'll say ChatGPT in your analytics. So you can start seeing like, okay, well, this page obviously ranks pretty well. What are we doing on this page that might have gotten it to that point where it's now being identified in the answer engine, and how can we replicate that process? Yeah, so I guess, yeah. And sorry, last thing is speed. Speed is also very important to LLMs because, and this is getting into performance, because answer engines want to answer very quickly. So if your page isn't loading very quickly, then it's going to probably push yours down on the list. And because it wants to respond as fast as possible to make sure that it's giving the most appropriate answer quickly. All those things combined. So I know that was a bit of a long answer, but thank you for taking that long walk with me.
No, it's all great stuff, and really important as well that, yeah, sometimes you don't even realize those technical implications here. And I like how you pointed out that accessibility, like that these are some of the practices that AI is taking have been best practices for accessibility, because that's how people digest content. That's what people want to see, and that's what these screen readers have been trained to use and learn for so long, that they're just adapting the principles now to AI. So it's always nice when you can make improvements to your site and it impacts several areas. You're not just doing this for AI, you're doing it for accessibility as well. So that's great. I'd like to we got about 20 minutes left, so I'd like to get to some of the questions in the chat. So thanks for folks who are submitting them. So one is an interesting question of kind of comparing, are there issues with using AI generated photos versus stock photos? And where do you specifically acknowledge that it's an AI generated photo? Is that just like in the alt text? Is that on the image itself, just somewhere on a disclosure page? So anyone have thoughts around that stuff?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it in the alt text itself unless it's acknowledged in the image. So if somewhere on the image has some little watermark that says AI generated, then you would include that in the alt text. The alt text should just be for someone who's unable to see the image, describing what's in the image itself. So if you wanted to say it was captioned, or say that it was created by AI, I would use like a caption beneath the image, like where you might acknowledge who, like, okay, this photo was taken by this photographer. You could say this photo is AI generated. So I would acknowledge it there and using the image caption, not the alt text.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that it's often, from a user trust standpoint, better to have that little caption than not, especially if you can kind of tell that it was created by AI. You want your user to know that you're using it, but also like you're acknowledging that you're using it and not trying to like slip something past them, or I don't know what. But I think that, as we have talked about, transparency is the best way to move forward with using actual AI content.
And as a follow-up to the last question, I know Melissa asked if there are specific tools like Yoast SEO that are designed to be optimized for AEO work. And yeah, I'd love if anybody could address that.
I wanted to speak when Max was saying this as well, because he brought something up that reminded me. But if you want to start really optimizing for AEO in a way that is kind of proactive, you feel like your content is already pretty written out for humans, it feels pretty digestible. One way to do that is to first ensure that you're using heading tags correctly, but then also rework your headings to be questions. Because Google will immediately pick up that there's a question and an answer, and it's going to push it up higher. So if you have a heading that's like, learn about SEO, and you want to change it into like, how can I learn about SEO? Like, it's going to reframe that answer. So that's one way, without even using a tool, that you can start to kind of restructure your content proactively. In terms of tools for optimizing AEO, I don't know that we're at that place yet, except for Yoast, which already offers the opportunity to structure your metadata, make sure everything is there and optimized. Similarly with just the structure of the page and how you're using headings, etc. But Max, I'm curious if you know any cool tips or tools.
No, this is pretty new. And so there isn't like one dedicated tool that I'm familiar with for AEO. There are a lot of tools out there that help with structured data, and obviously with like speed and accessibility. So in those things, I mean, caching is always good. Doing accessibility audits is always a good idea. And then as far as structured data, as Maple touched on, Yoast can help with some of that as well. But maybe it's not useful.
One thing that you could do, this hasn't been like, measured as successful yet, but you could take like let's say Google has Gemini, and they're certainly using one of their Gemini models in this process. Take your content, paste it in there, and ask, does this answer the question? How well do you think this answers the question? What do you think is missing? And use that to edit your content. That might help you out.
That's a great suggestion. But yeah, I think we're seeing Yoast and some of these tools incorporated a lot. So we're doing that. And then I think what I'd recommend as well is, I know there's starting to be some checklists come out there. Our partner Nexus Marketing has a great checklist on AEO. I think they were calling it GEO back when they created the checklist. But but there's good stuff like that you can do just to make sure you're kind of hitting the core points and that your content's optimized for it. So Sayang, I don't know if you were going to say something. Okay. Well, I'd love also, and the last question we have here from the audience is a pretty basic one that I was going to ask anyway. But what are some examples of LRM or platforms that are best uses for nonprofits? So I know I think we've kind of talked in the frame of ChatGPT, but is that the main tool that we should be using, or are there others that are out there?
In my opinion, you should try them all for your use case. There's usually a free tier that you can use. So the main ones that you might use are Gemini from Google, ChatGPT, which would be using, I think if you're paying now, they've got their I guess OpenAI 4, ChatGPT 4, GPT 4.1. That's what it is now. They just released. There's Claude from Anthropic. There's Mistral, which is a French company. So if you have some GDPR issues, they might be good to use. And then there's also DeepSeek from China. These are all available to use. I would test them out again. So like for development work, most people, Claude 3.5 and now 3.7 was the gold standard for developers. Now a lot of people are using the latest version of Gemini too. So these things they change rapidly and weekly. People are very much choosing based on the vibes at this point. Still, there are some quantified methods and different tests that they run, but still, oftentimes the model that scores the best on that test doesn't end up being used because people like how the other one does things.
Yeah, those are all great resources, Ben, that I don't even know some of them, or I haven't used them, so I'd like to investigate as well. Some content tools are also integrating their own AI sort of tool. I'm not quite sure what it would be categorized, so the developers would know better than I. But for example, Sprout Social, which is a social media scheduling tool, or SEMrush, which is an SEO tool, or Canva, those all have new AI tools that can generate content, can give you AI analytics reports, anything along those lines. If you're already paying for a membership for one of those platforms, I would suggest just poking around and playing around and seeing what is possible. You'll see that often they're not as sophisticated as some of the chatbots, and you'll see them become more sophisticated over time. Like Canva generative photos were awful originally, and they've gotten much better over time. But even just playing around and like seeing what's possible and what is out there, I think is a good start, especially if you already have access to a premium platform.
Very well.
Yeah, the one thing that I want to add to this too is that models are evolving very quickly. So today, one model, one service might be the best for your use case, but tomorrow, the one that you identified as the worst could be the best. So there should be some sort of plan to reevaluate these tools every so often as you're progressing through your AI journey.
Great. Max, I was going to have you follow up with this other question that came in through the chat. But how concerned should we be about using some of those free models and them collecting our data? There's the old saying, if it's a free product, then you're the product. And so are they just stealing all of our information and everything we input into it? Or
Yeah, probably. We know that like if it's Google, then they're using your data. They even say so in their terms of service. Facebook, their Llama, I believe, also will use your data. OpenAI, if you're using the like ChatGPT, they can use your data for training. I know that they have a 30-day retainment policy, but if you're using their API, they say that they don't use your data at all. And then with Claude's an interesting one. Anthropic's models are interesting because Anthropic was actually, there's a small 30-second story. Anthropic was actually born out of OpenAI from one of their key people. And they initially wanted to build their models around like more privacy focus. And so that's why there was such a big draw to Anthropic and Claude initially. I don't know if that's still the case, but I would recommend looking at the terms of service, which I know nobody really reads those, but if you do have a moment and you are trying to go to sleep quickly, then those are your best sources for that.
I can just chime in on that a little bit. So if you're using ChatGPT, there is an option that is not on by default to opt out of using your chats for training. Most of the providers will have something like that where you can opt out of having it used for training, but not necessarily all. That's why there's this company Mistral in Europe that a lot of European companies might prefer to use, just because the GDPR reasons. But yeah, you can also, it is possible to run some of these models locally on your computer, especially if you have a newer Mac. You can't run something as powerful as like the latest version of ChatGPT that you're going to see there, but you can run something that's okay. So if you have a privacy reason that when you're generating content and you want to keep something private, You won't have access to as good a model, but you can run that locally if you're a little bit technically inclined.
Yeah.
This also makes me want to speak to how it just is important to include any AI practices in your staff policy or your organization policies, just about what kind of data or information that your organization can and wants to use in AI tools and what information they really don't want to use. And just making sure that that's really clear and that there are guidelines for folks who maybe have questions about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was going to say this is, AI tools to me are just like any other tool that has existed. And so, the project management software that you've been using for 5 years could be doing the same things. And so it comes down to, I think, just not ignoring those terms of service that everybody tends to ignore and actually reviewing and reading those to make sure, how is my data being stored? How is it being used? And then setting those internal practices, as everybody said, of, ensure that staff are not putting in sensitive information or identifying information, things like that might get you into trouble later on. So to me, it's, again, yeah, just like any other software or tool that you use, you need to kind of do that appropriate research into how they're going to be using your data. Well, we have about a few minutes left here, so I just wanted to ask one last question for the whole group to kind of end on here, that so which we'll get into in a second. But again, I'll say hopefully this has been beneficial to folks. We're always happy to have these conversations. I think any one of us would happily just talk one-on-one or answer any additional questions you may have about using AI. We can also brainstorm or discuss some ideas and ways that we can incorporate it either in your processes or in your actual websites and web tools. So don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact me directly, or, as I said, Cornershop at hello@cornershopcreative.com. So with that, I'd love to go around. Maybe Seong, you can start us off with this, but kind of what's that one piece of wisdom that you would leave to somebody who wanted to start testing out AI and maybe dip their toes into the water? What's that first step that you would recommend for them?
Yeah, my biggest recommendation would be to start small. We did talk about some big topics. We talked about ethics, but instead of overwhelming yourself with the big picture or big processes, I would say just start small and start with yourself. So taking a moment to reflect on your individual role at your nonprofit and asking yourself what's something you do repeatedly. What's one way or two ways that AI could help streamline or simplify a task very quickly? This could be as simple as drafting emails, organizing data that's anonymized for our previous conversation, or automating any routine tasks that you do repeatedly. And once you get a grasp of these small tasks, you're familiar with how these AI tools work, I recommend kind of expanding and experimenting with more complex uses of AI from there. I will hand it over to Mabel.
Yeah, great suggestion. I think that my little tidbit or nudge of encouragement would be to try to develop a prompt, like Seong was talking about, those 4 key principles for developing a prompt. And you can even make up a scenario. It doesn't have to be something having to do with your nonprofit, but create a prompt and see what a chatbot or tool produces. And then compare that to your brand guide and see, like, is this drastically different from what I want to be saying? Like, is this pretty in line? And there are some little revisions I could do. Like, just kind of gauge where you are with the content that is being produced and go from there.
I guess, and those are great suggestions. And my only addition is, in the same way that most techies or developers get good with any sort of tool they use, is play around with it. Just go in there and mess around with it, see what it can do, try to break it, try to make something work, try to make something not work. Spend some time messing around with it. So you can go to chatgpt.com, or if you go to Gemini and Google, just mess around it, see what you can get it to do, and see where it might help you.
Great. All right, Max.
Yeah. One of the biggest barriers that I keep hearing, and it came up at NTC a lot, was that people don't know what to start with. And so, and especially when it comes to a prompt, it's like, well, there's so much information on there on how to craft a prompt, what needs to be included in a prompt, and doing prompt engineering. And do I continue the conversation, or do I actually try to make the best prompt from the get-go? And really, this is kind of a little hack, but if you just state what you want in like ChatGPT, for example, then you ask it to help you refine that prompt. It will actually help you prompt engineer, and so then you can refine your prompt that way, and then take that prompt, put it into a new chat, and then see what happens. So that's a really good way to kind of start off with prompt engineering. And as you do this more often, you kind of start seeing a pattern of what types of information you need. But it all starts with just saying what you want. So if you say like, I want a summary of this article, that's not a great prompt because it's just going to give you a pretty basic summary. But if you say, I want a summary of this article that actually identifies the specific data points that are associated with whatever, then that's how you get to that state of confidence with AI, because that's where you really want to be. Is you want to be confident with these tools and know that what you're putting into them, you're getting the right output. It's all about inputs and outputs, and so it's take that philosophy, and yeah, I hope you guys run with that and get some good outputs.
Awesome. These are great ideas, great suggestions here. And so I really thank all four of you for your time today and giving us your advice and thoughts on this. It's obviously an overwhelming place to start. And so I think you've kind of boiled it down to some of the essentials and helped us where we can get started. So thank you, the four of you, and thank you for everybody who's attended. We will be sending out a full recording. So if you were late or left early, you'll definitely get this as a recording over email. But again, any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can go to our website at cornershopcreative.com, or again, email us at hello@cornershopcreative.com. You can even look us up in ChatGPT, actually. So thank you all for attending. We appreciate it, and have a great day.